Most intelligent people get this one wrong. You probably consider yourself a rational person, someone who analyzes situations before reacting, who doesn't get carried away by impulses, who uses their head before their heart. And that's always been a source of pride for you. Whilst others made decisions based on emotion, you kept your calm. Whilst the people around you got lost in dramas, you remained clear-headed. Your intelligence has always been your protection, your shield against the mistakes you saw others making. But there's something you don't realize, a psychological error that happens precisely because of your rationality. The more intelligent you are, the more you trust in your analytical capacity, the greater the risk of falling into a silent trap. And the worst part is that you don't see when it happens, because your own intelligence works against you. It creates a perfect justification for every wrong decision, a logical explanation for every destructive behavior. You think the problem is not having enough information, not having analyzed all the angles. But what really keeps you trapped is something else. It's the belief that your rationality is infallible, that if you can explain something logically, then you're right. And this blind confidence is exactly what prevents you from seeing reality. This didn't start now. You've always been the one who solved problems. The friend who gave sensible advice, the bloke who kept his cool when everyone else lost their patience. And for a long time, this worked. Your rational decisions brought good results. You avoided unnecessary conflicts, built a stable life, and each success reinforced your confidence in this method. But then something changed. You began to notice that certain situations didn't improve, even when you applied your usual logic. Relationships that should work simply didn't work. People you analyzed as suitable turned out to be the opposite. Decisions that seemed rational took you to places you didn't want to be. And your first reaction was to seek more information, analyze more deeply. You thought the problem was lack of data, that if you studied human behavior better, understood psychology better, you could predict and control the results. So you read more, watched more content, learned about personality types, behavioral patterns, warning signs. But even so, you kept making mistakes. And the strangest thing is, they were always mistakes of the same type. You found yourself repeating patterns you'd sworn you'd identified and resolved, choosing people you knew were problematic, remaining in situations your own analysis said were harmful. And each time this happened, you had an explanation, a logical reason. You weren't being irrational. You had solid arguments. You could justify each decision in a way that made sense. And this is exactly where the problem lies. Your intelligence isn't protecting you, it's imprisoning you. At first, you only used logic to solve external problems, to make practical decisions, choose a career, plan a project, organize your life. And it worked perfectly. But over time, you began to apply this same logic to emotional situations, to relationships, to feelings. And without realizing it, you began to rationalize things that shouldn't be rationalized. You met someone who attracted you, but who showed clear signs of instability. And instead of simply recognizing it wasn't a good choice, you began to analyze. You thought about the reasons why that person acted that way. You created theories about their past. You found explanations that made the behavior understandable. And the more you understood, the more you justified staying. Then it became a habit. Every time something bothered you, you didn't allow the discomfort to be enough. You needed to understand why it bothered you. You analyzed whether your discomfort was rational, whether it was fair, whether it made sense. And often you concluded it wasn't, that you were being too demanding, too sensitive, that the problem wasn't real enough to justify a reaction. And then it became who you are. A man who doesn't trust his own instincts, who doubts his own emotions, who needs concrete proof before admitting something is wrong. You've transformed your emotional life into a courtroom where you only accept verdicts based on irrefutable evidence. And whilst you wait for that proof, you continue living situations that any external observer would recognize as destructive. You've become an expert at finding the exception, the reason why that rule you know doesn't apply to your specific case. You've read about toxic relationships and can identify them easily when you see them from the outside. But when you're inside one, your mind creates elaborate justifications. You're not ignoring the signs, you see them clearly, but you manage to explain each one in a way that makes them acceptable. And here's the first thing almost no one realizes. Your intelligence isn't being used to protect you, it's being used to keep you trapped. Each analysis you make, each explanation you find, each theory you develop serves to justify why you can continue where you are. Your rationality has become a tool for self-deception. Think about how many times you've known something was wrong. You felt it. It was physical discomfort, a sensation in your stomach, an unease that wouldn't leave you in peace. But instead of trusting that, you began to question it. You asked whether that sensation had foundation, whether it was based on facts or just paranoia. And frequently you concluded it was paranoia, that you were creating problems where none existed. So you ignored the discomfort. You decided to be more rational, more mature, more understanding, and the discomfort didn't disappear, it just went deeper. You learned to live with it, to consider it as a normal part of life, as something intelligent people need to tolerate because they understand not everything is perfect. But the truth is, you weren't being more mature. You were being less honest. You were betraying your own instincts in the name of supposed superior rationality. And this pattern repeated so many times that you lost the ability to distinguish between healthy flexibility and chronic self-deception. Now observe how this works day to day. You're in a relationship where something doesn't work. It could be communication, it could be intimacy, it could be the feeling that you're always adjusting, always accommodating, always being understanding, whilst the other person remains unchanged. And you know this. You're not blind. You identify the pattern perfectly, but then your rational mind kicks in. It reminds you that relationships require effort, that no one is perfect, that you have flaws too, that perhaps your expectations are unrealistic, that at your age, finding someone better would be difficult, that you've already invested so much time that giving up now would waste everything. And each of these arguments makes sense in isolation. The problem is, you're using logic to maintain an emotionally unsustainable situation. You're applying rationality in a context where your feelings should have a voice. And the more you do this, the further you drift from your own truth. You construct a narrative so well structured that you come to believe it completely. You know what you need to do. On some deep level, you've always known, but something in you resists. And that something is exactly your identification with being rational, admitting you were wrong, that your analysis was mistaken, that you deceived yourself despite all your intelligence would be a blow to your sense of identity. So you prefer to continue, prefer to maintain the narrative, prefer to prove you're right, even if it means living wrong. This resistance isn't laziness, it isn't cowardice. It's fear of facing the idea that your greatest strength might be your greatest weakness, that the same analytical capacity that brought you success in so many areas might be sabotaging you in the most important ones. And recognizing this would require rethinking everything, would require admitting you have blind spots, that your vision of yourself is incomplete. You begin to realize you live in two simultaneous worlds. In the external world, you maintain the image of someone who has everything under control, someone lucid, balanced, rational. And people believe this because you really do seem to have answers for everything. You speak with authority, your analyses are coherent, your arguments are well constructed. But in the internal world, there's constant tension, a sensation that something doesn't fit. that you're playing a role instead of living your truth. And this tension grows each time you use your intelligence to explain why everything's fine when clearly it isn't. Each time you rationalize yet another unacceptable behavior. Each time you convince yourself that this time it's different. And the most dangerous part of all this is that you're not consciously lying. You genuinely believe your own justifications. When you explain why you remained in a bad situation, you're not inventing excuses. You genuinely see logic in it. Your mind has created an alternative reality so convincing that you can no longer distinguish between reason and rationalization. This doesn't just affect your romantic relationships, it affects friendships where you tolerate disrespect because you can understand the other person's reasons. It affects your career when you remain in situations that diminish you because you have rational arguments for not risking changes. It affects your health when you ignore signals from your body because you have more important things to do. You've created a system where your emotions need to pass through a filter of rational approval before being considered valid. And this filter is so rigorous that almost nothing passes through. You only allow yourself to feel something when you have irrefutable justification. And in the meantime, an essential part of you is being silenced. It's not fear of losing. It's fear of being at peace. Because being at peace would mean stopping analyzing, stopping trying to control, stopping using your intelligence as a shield. And without that shield, you'd have to face feelings you've spent years avoiding. You'd have to admit vulnerabilities that your rational image doesn't allow. You'd have to accept that there are things that can't be resolved just by thinking. The inconvenient truth is that you use analysis as a form of emotional procrastination. Each time you should act, you choose to analyze more. Each time you should feel, you choose to think, and this creates an illusion of control. You feel productive because you're always processing information, always reaching conclusions, always developing theories, but internally nothing changes. You continue in the same patterns, in the same situations, making the same choices. And each cycle that repeats reinforces the prison. Because now you're not just trapped in the pattern, you're trapped in the narrative you've built about the pattern. You can't change the behavior without destroying the story you tell about yourself. And whilst you postpone this, something in you is closing off. You're losing the capacity to connect spontaneously, to trust a feeling without needing to dissect it, to make a decision based on intuition. You become so dependent on analysis that you feel lost without it. And paradoxically, this dependence makes you less capable of navigating complex situations, because real life doesn't wait for you to finish your analysis. People don't pause whilst you develop theories about them. Important moments happen whilst you're still thinking, and when you finally reach a conclusion, the situation has already changed. But you still act based on the old analysis, creating a constant mismatch between your understanding and reality. You come to live always a few steps behind, reacting to situations that have already evolved, applying solutions that made sense in another context. And this generates more frustration, because you're doing everything right theoretically, but the results remain wrong. And the tendency is to analyze even more, creating a vicious cycle. The weight of this accumulates in ways you don't admit. You feel tired in a way sleep doesn't resolve, irritated with small things because the big ones you don't allow yourself to question, distant from people because genuine connection requires vulnerability that your rationality considers imprudent. You look at other men who live more intuitively and feel a mixture of envy and contempt. Envy because they seem lighter, more connected, more alive. Contempt because you see the mistakes they make, the impulsive decisions, the lack of planning. And you use those mistakes to justify your own method, to reaffirm that your way is superior, even when the results suggest otherwise. But the truth you avoid is that those men, with all their mistakes, often end up in better places. Not because they're less intelligent, but because they're willing to fail quickly and correct. Whilst you avoid mistakes by calculating so much, you end up paralyzed. They act, fail, learn, and move on. You think, analyze, justify, and remain. And there's more. Your intelligence has created another problem. You've become so good at seeing multiple perspectives that you've lost the ability to have a firm position. For every argument, you see the counter-argument. For every decision, you see the alternatives. And what seemed like sophistication has become chronic indecision. You can no longer trust a simple judgment. Everything needs to be complex, nuanced, multifaceted. And whilst you ponder all the variables, life passes by. Opportunities close, relationships deteriorate, time runs out, and you continue in the same analysis, increasingly refined and increasingly useless. The problem isn't the other person, it's the pattern you accept. And you accept it not through weakness, but through excess of explanation. You can justify anything, make the unacceptable acceptable, normalize the abnormal, and you do this so competently that you convince not just others, but mainly yourself. Each relationship that should have ended months ago drags on for years because you keep finding reasons to give one more chance. Each professional situation that diminishes you persists because you can explain why it's not the right moment to change. Each toxic friendship is maintained because you understand the traumas that make the person act that way, and you take pride in this understanding, in this capacity to see beyond, to not be reactive, to be mature. But this maturity you cultivate is just an elaborate form of avoiding confrontation, of not establishing boundaries, of not protecting what should be non-negotiable in you. The truth is, you're afraid of appearing irrational, of appearing emotional, of appearing like those people you've always criticized for making hasty decisions. So you go to the opposite extreme. You become so cautious, so considered, so understanding that you lose your own voice. Your needs come last because there's always a logical reason to prioritize them later. You tell yourself you're being strategic, that you're choosing your battles, that you're being intelligent by not reacting. But strategy that never transforms into action is just rationalization. And choosing battles when you never fight any is just a way of avoiding conflict. And being intelligent in a way that keeps you unhappy isn't really intelligence. Think about how many times you've felt anger and suppressed it because you decided it wasn't productive. How many times you felt the desire to say no and said yes because you had logical reasons to accommodate. How many times you've noticed an injustice and let it pass because confronting would seem uncontrolled. You've transformed your emotions into something that needs to be managed instead of something that needs to be heard. And this constant management exhausts you because you never allow an emotion to just be an emotion. Everything needs to be analyzed, contextualized, relativized, and in this process the message the emotion carried is lost. Your emotions exist for a reason. They carry information your rational mind can't access. They connect you with the present moment in a way analysis can't. They show you what really matters when you remove all the layers of justification, but you've learned to treat them as intrusions, as signs of weakness, as something that needs to be corrected or ignored. And the more you do this, the more disconnected you become, not just from others, but mainly from yourself. You become a stranger in your own life, observing from outside, analyzing, but never really present. And there's another cost you don't consider. The people around you feel this. They notice you're never completely present, that there's always a part of you that's evaluating, judging, calculating, and this creates distance. Even when you're physically present, emotionally you're inaccessible. Intimate relationships die not from lack of intelligence, but from lack of presence. And you, with all your analytical capacity, can't create presence. Because presence requires letting go of control, requires being vulnerable, requires accepting not knowing. And all of this goes against your rational nature, so you have relationships where you're admired but not felt, where you're respected but not desired, where you're right but you're alone. And even this you can explain. You have theories about compatibility, about timing, about how difficult it is to find someone at your level. More explanations, more justifications, more reasons not to change. But deep down, in moments of absolute honesty, you know it's not about finding the right person. It's about you being so fortified in your rationality that there's no space for another person to enter. You've built a castle of logic and locked yourself inside it, and now you look through the window, wanting connection, but without the courage to open the door. Because opening the door would mean admitting you were wrong, that you spent years building a protection that became a prison, that your greatest virtue became your greatest obstacle. And that's difficult to swallow for someone who's always prided himself on seeing things clearly. Understanding this changes how you react. Not all at once. No one wakes up one day and undoes years of conditioning, but forever. Because once you see this pattern, you can't completely ignore it anymore. You begin to notice when you're rationalizing instead of reasoning, when you're justifying instead of deciding, when you're thinking instead of feeling. And this awareness in itself is already transformative, because for the first time you're not trying to solve the problem with more analysis. You're recognizing that analysis is part of the problem, that adding more thought to a situation that needs action only perpetuates the cycle. Change begins when you stop trying to understand everything, when you accept that some things don't make sense and that's all right, when you allow a feeling to be sufficient to make a decision without needing to build a complete argumentative case. This doesn't mean abandoning reason. It means putting it in the right place. Reason is an excellent tool for technical problems, for planning, for analyzing complex situations, but it's not suitable for all areas of life. And forcing it into spaces where it doesn't belong creates more problems than it solves. You can be intelligent and feel. You can be rational and vulnerable. You can analyze and act. These things aren't opposites. They complement each other when you understand the role of each. The problem arises when you use one to suppress the other. Stoic practice isn't about eliminating emotions, it's about not being controlled by them. But you've distorted this, transformed it into eliminating them completely. Into becoming so rational, you become inhuman. The Stoics felt loved, connected. They just didn't allow destructive passions to command their choices. But you've gone beyond. You don't even allow constructive emotions to have a voice. Marcus Aurelius loved his wife. Epictetus had affection for his students. Seneca maintained deep friendships. They were rational, but they weren't machines. And you, by trying to be more stoic than the Stoics, have become less human than they were. True control doesn't come from suppressing everything. It comes from knowing when to let go, from having the wisdom to distinguish between what requires reason and what requires heart. And you've lost this distinction. For you, everything is a problem to be solved, and not everything in life is a problem. Some things are experiences to be lived. You don't need to understand why you love someone. You don't need to have a logical list of reasons to end something that harms you. You don't need to prove your feelings are valid before acting according to them. This is living like a barrister instead of living like a human being, and life isn't a courtroom. You're not being judged. You don't need to present evidence for each decision. You don't need to construct an infallible argument before making a choice. Sometimes the choice is simple. Does this make me well or not? Does this take me where I want to go or not? And the answer can be a feeling instead of a logical conclusion. Learning to trust this is frightening, because you've spent so long distrusting yourself, questioning each impulse, that now you need to relearn something that should be natural. You need to relearn to listen when your body tells you something's wrong, to trust when your intuition points in a direction, to accept that you know without knowing how you know. This isn't irrationality, it's wisdom of another kind. It's the emotional intelligence you've neglected whilst developing analytical intelligence, and both are necessary. You won't get far with just one. It's like trying to walk with only one leg. You can, but it's awkward, tiring, and limited. Integration happens when you stop seeing reason and emotion as enemies. When you understand, your analysis becomes more powerful when informed by emotion, and your emotion becomes clearer when filtered by reason. But this requires you to stop using one to suppress the other. It requires humility, admitting you don't have all the answers, that your way of seeing the world is partial, that there are things you don't understand about yourself. And for someone who's built their identity on being rational, this is an enormous challenge, but it's the only path. You can continue living in your fortress of logic, perfectly protected and perfectly isolated, or you can risk it. You can open space for what you don't understand, for what you don't control, for what can't be explained in arguments, and the result won't be perfect. You'll make mistakes. You'll make decisions that in retrospect will seem hasty. You'll regret things. But you'll also live, truly, not as an analytical observer of your own life, but as an active participant in it. You'll connect in ways you never managed before. You'll feel things your rationality always blocked. You'll discover parts of yourself you've suppressed for years. And yes, it'll hurt, because feeling is like that. But it'll also be real. And real is always better than the illusion of control you maintain now. The choice is yours, and it doesn't need to be radical. You don't need to become another person. You can keep your intelligence, your analytical capacity, your careful approach. You just need to add what's missing. You need to integrate what you separated. You need to balance what you unbalanced. And the first step is simple. Next time you feel something and your mind begins to question whether that feeling is valid, pause. Don't enter the analysis. Just acknowledge you felt it. You don't need to act immediately. But you also don't need to invalidate, just observe, and gradually you'll relearn to trust. If this made sense, write in the comments the word clarity, because recognizing this pattern is already half the journey to change.